So we all know that you could really divine on anything, but there are some questions that are a little too freaky um, to bring to anyone else but that one spirit I know we all have. In every court, there's the one guy who you're like, all right, bro, hear me out. I know this is a little weird, but how, what are we doing tonight?
The freaky spirit.
Yeah.
I tend to agree. I think we all do have the one freaky spirit that's willing to answer the freaky questions. And it's always the ones where like here's the thing, is like sometimes when I'm divining, I will get the kind of response from my main spirits that are like either not just like you're not asking the right question, but it's more like you shouldn't even be asking this in the first place because like think Mark, and I'm like that's what like think Svinga, like use your brain, and I'm like you're right, I'm definitely because over divining is a thing, and we discussed that in episode 9, I think it was, if I recall
Yeah.
correctly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
a while since we did like the last like divination centered episode.
Been 30 episodes. My God.
I know, my goodness. And it's essentially come up a lot in our different topics, which is like, don't over divine. It's a delicate balance for sure, but like you are taking a magnifying glass to a bacteria culture is one way that my godfather phrased it to me once. So like the closer you zoom in, the closer you are to the bacteria. So like,
Mhm.
the possibilities of it and even like the stink of it or the confusion of it can infect you the deeper you dive. But having said that, uh your pursuit is always a clarity, right? Um,
Right.
and so some spirits will just be like, not a good idea. I do agree with you. There's always that one freaky spirit that will be like, oh, not only will I look at it for you, I will give you my unsolicited opinion for longer than you care to have it on this. So
Oh,
then you have to tell them like, dude, no, actually, I'm good now.
there's nothing like the when you don't even ask a question and they tell you things. That's always the tricky part as well. It's like I really
Literally.
didn't need to know this about this person. I'm deleting this from my memory. Like goodbye.
That is so true. Like it's always the unsolicited commentator spirits that are like, I mean, they all give us commentary on things, but like there's that one that will be like just random shit, and you're not even gonna go and check if it's true. Like you can feel that it's probably true, but you're not gonna go and like consult your yes no oracle and be just like, was what you said about that guy's uncle the minute while we were having brunch true? Because that's like feels weird and dirty for me to know.
Mhm. It's like I want to know what I'm doing tonight. I don't want to know what my next door neighbor is doing tonight.
Literally. I was like, well, dude, don't go through their walls and check that out.
Mhm.
Freaky ass spirits.
The voyeurs of the spirit world who get their entertainment one way or another.
Literally.
Yeah, the man's they kick through watching things and laughing at it.
Mhm.
Oh no, not the reply guy spirits. They're in the YouTube comments of your psyche being like, bro.
Hey out here. And the main thing you want to do, folks, is make sure that you're not the subject of their conversations. So keep yourself clean.
I swear to God, that is like a really good point of medicine for those kinds of spirits because they can be helpful in their own way, right? And hugely so.
Mhm.
Is like make sure that the drama they're watching is not you, and that there's something for them to watch so they don't instigate it.
Genuinely, yeah. Let other people create enough problems.
That doesn't
It's
touch
fine.
you and
Mhm.
isn't about you and isn't about your friends, and it's just like things you are warned about so that they don't touch you.
Exactly.
Mhm.
not alarmed at the frightful howls which you may hear. It's Svinga,
Hey.
Salt,
Yo.
and bonked on the head for asking the wrong questions key.
Bonk. We
Yeah.
need to put in the sound effect. Bonk.
But yeah, it's always those divinatory results that come through. That's like, either don't ask this or why are you asking me this? Because you already know the answer. You don't need to hear it from me.
Yeah, truly, truly. This is why you are now pivoting careers from biologist, in the day, sorcerer by night, to sorcerer by night and VTuber by day. And your VTuber alias, where you have some kind of anime boy rig or something, is one in which you give unsolicited advice, stream of consciousness style, and over-explain political conflicts in various countries. And
Mhm.
that way you don't have to worry about it anymore.
I would much rather get on a mic all day and be like, okay, so let's talk about Suriname.
Mhm. Mercury mining.
Oh yeah. Don't even get me started.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Give us the little housekeeping so we don't get you started on your prolific knowledge of Mercury economy.
Okay, so Guyana. But for real, remember to check us out, not in Guyana, but at twitter.com/Frightful Howls and patreon.com/The Frightful Howls. We have a bonus episode every month curated by and just for our patrons, a Discord server that is popping off. We've been having a lot of fun in there, especially as community projects begin to form. Recently, people have been scrying and practicing mediumship development, which is great. We have Salt's fantastic almanac, which at the beginning of the month comes out and allows you to know what's going on in the sky. We also have a monthly live occult book club where we discuss a text of your choosing, show notes for every episode, and more. Also, remember to give us a like, rating, and review on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you may be listening to us. It helps us fight the demiurge of the algorithm. Also, last but not least, check out our services. I offer personalized coaching in magic and mediumship, sorcery for hire, readings, custom talismans, oils, tools, the whole works. Sfinga offers Balkan Favamancy readings, and Salt's books are currently closed, but again, keep an eye out for his monthly astrological almanac on the Patreon. You can find all of us on social media, namely Instagram. Sfinga is at Dragon Cunning, Salt is at Salt C and C, and I'm at barnowl.key.
Man, that almanac though, well worth just the price of admission alone. Though I think we have a really fat Patreon, and by that I mean
Mhm.
like we have like the Q&As, which is a 2 to 3 hour extra bonus episode every month that people curate together. We have the almanac, we have the book club. Like there's just a lot going on, and now the Discord server, which has been going strong for since May of this year.
It's been wonderful to see the scope of content grow in proportion to the community.
Hmm.
It's through that wonderful feedback that we get from all of you that makes the extra stuff behind the paywall possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So if that sounds fun to you, consider pledging. It's $10 a month, and it's a lot of fun. We have really a great community, and we're so grateful to each and every one of you. And even if you can't quite do that, the rating and like does a lot. Like I hate to sound like one of those YouTubers that's just like and subscribe, but like it really does help so much. More than you might think. Especially if you're willing to leave a comment on iTunes review of what you feel about the podcast and how it's helped you out, or if you like it. And certainly everything on Spotify and Apple and YouTube, which is YouTube is like where we get the least amount of like views and engagement. It's mostly Spotify, but like definitely like any amount of like comments and likes and stuff like that, like it actually it does wonders for getting our work out there. And lately we've been getting a lot of people coming to us being like, oh, I found you through like this way, and it was precisely because we noticed that we're getting up in the algorithm. So as much as we hate to say it, it actually is a real thing. So thank you all so much.
And pretty soon
Hey.
we're also going to be introducing thumbnails. So expect this episode on YouTube to be titled "He Asked His Spirit What," and all that kind of
Oh
fun
no.
content.
he asked Spirit, what? And it's like in the background, you just see like Cowrie Divination and like a bunch of tarot cards and like someone doing moon blocks like Xiaopei.
Green and
And like
yellow
so
text.
yeah, exactly. And then like some like a shocked face or something. Yeah, we'll finally
Those
start engagement farming through like horrible thumbnails.
those really deep fried pictures of like prendas outside.
Yeah.
Look.
Oh, if you're cold, they're cold. Bring them in.
For real, for real. It'll be my if enough people subscribe to the Patreon, I will get a, VTuber rig. It will be a werewolf named Lycon Subscribe. Um, which,
Oh my God. I think if you were to do a werewolf VTuber rig, the world would explode.
yeah, I think that's one of the seals of the apocalypse.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be bad.
Yeah. I would want to do a dragon or a sphinx. And it's funny because I feel like Salt, you know those Instagram memes where it's like an image of like a random wealth deity from the Taoist pantheon, and it's just says like to affirm. And it's just like a mountain of coins and gold ingots like
Yes.
spewing. Yeah, okay. So like if you don't know what I'm talking about, you will soon because they will because you heard my voice say this, they will soon be on your algorithm, I swear to God. But like that is definitely your VTuber rig. So like it's just like you're like the money deity and it's just like to affirm and like every time someone subscribes to you on Twitch, like just ingots spill all over the screen.
I mean, I send about 50 of those in a given day if I log into Instagram. Like,
I know you've checked your Instagram when I wake up and it's like I have 50 notifications and it's all those memes from you.
yes, because we all deserve money blessings. Everyone deserves money blessings. Make sure that Sashen is offered to and that you like the images in which he's included so that he
Yes.
can spread the wealth.
Yes, I've actually had a friend who does follow me Instagram, my magic Instagram, and not my personal one, and it's just like, hey, why are you liking all these Chinese like ingot videos? And I'm like, you have no idea. Because like I see them and it just says like Dragon Cunning has liked it. I'm like, yeah, because I'm trying to affirm.
Yeah, like to affirm, man.
Well, speaking of liking to affirm, love a smooth transition.
Mhm.
Today we're discussing, it's been a while, because like I said, it's been 30 episodes since our divination question, which is more like a primer in the, note how to approach divination, like what are some philosophical understandings of it. And today we're getting into the nitty-gritty of how to formulate good questions. This was a request from our patrons for an episode topic because our patrons do get to request episodes. And one of the things that we were thinking about with this is all three of us have had experiences, and quite extensively, being professional diviners. We also have trained in various respects in divination under mentors, under spirits, under traditions
Mhm.
where our ability to divine is directly tested. And often what occurs isn't just looking at trance, right? Looking at accurate spirit contact. It's also looking at when you're divining for yourself or when you're helping guide a client to a question, is formulating these queries correctly. I think this is an interesting thing to note in the beginning is that not every divination system necessarily is beholden to the idea of a question in the first place. So for example, plenty of systems coming out of West Africa, you don't really come with a question so much as you get read. The spirits speak, the oracle, does its utterances. And then if it's a really good divination, the questions you already had in your mind are answered by that point. Like you don't necessarily have to come with a question in mind, but if you do, without uttering them, you've already had them answered. And then whatever's left over, whatever comes, like arises in your mind, and you're thinking, okay, now that I know that, I want to like talk about this. That's when you get to, spit out those questions near the end.
Mhm.
And so I think that is also a really good thing to note too, is that oftentimes a good, diviner, it does not necessarily need to know your question to answer it appropriately. But for many of us, we're working in systems in which a question should be breathed on the tools or should be deliberately asked. I would say, Salt, correct me if I'm wrong, but for Horary, because it deals with the timing of when you actually draw the chart, the prayer that you're invoking or the way that you're supplicating the stars, it is specifically question based, even if you do want to do a general analysis.
Yeah, it's very much like dependent on the actual question itself. And it's probably one of the more pickier kinds when it comes to the questions as well, I would argue. Like
Hmm.
there's different divination methods and a lot of them have their own, as you said, that some don't need questions, some take any question and some need very particular questions. Like there's a whole gamut, which is I think one of the reasons why this episode is gonna touch on these necessities and why it's, useful information for anyone to kind of grapple with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I would say as well, technically speaking, any divination system can answer any question. But doesn't mean that all spirits are willing to engage with everything. So let's begin then in our little survey. Because we want this to be one of like the really, I mean, we have like three types of episodes. We've talked about this before, right? We have research heavy episodes about folklore and magic. We have kind of advice-based episodes or practicums as we call them, which is like this. And then we also have our guest feature episodes, which always feature a friend. We have been getting emails from people who want to promote books and classes and so on, but if we are not personal friends in real life, it's a no. We really want to keep the kind of tone and lighthearted, kind of friendship heavy nature of this podcast because the three of us love each other very much and we love the people we have on because we actually care about them personally. We want to keep that vibe going. So our guests are friends only. There's plenty of great podcasts out there if you want to listen to interviews. With that said, we kind of structured this episode on a who, what, when, where, why, and how basis. And I would say that we're beginning with who. So,
Right.
which spirits are we going to be asking? And one of the things that I do a lot, I mentioned this before in other episodes, but when I have a question and it's like, whether I'm looking to have a recipe for a charm checked by my spirits, whether it is a dream that I've had that I want to run by my spirits and see, was it significant or was it just my mind? Like, was it just nothing to worry about? What's going on exactly? Is this a spiritually significant dream? Is this an anxiety nightmare or is this like a warning nightmare? Like, what is going on? One of the things that I look to is asking my spirits, who among you is willing to speak on this?
Yeah. That's a really great move, and it automatically solves a lot of the problems or eliminates the hassle that we'll be getting to in later in the episode. Being as these spirits already have advice; they already want to help, and are likely going to be the ones familiar with the situation and having expertise in the matter to begin with.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, there's some spirits who straight up won't answer divination at all, right? Like, they just don't like divination. Like, they don't like giving oracles for anything other than, well, I said it, that's enough, or I'm not even going to say it. Like, figure it out yourself. Like, there are some spirits like that out there as well, which is kind of standoffish, but that's how they can be.
Well, you're like, okay, bro, appreciate that. Anyway, bottom text. Okay, bro, moving on. But it's true. I think among your court, you probably know who your diviners are, the spirits that are most willing to give answers, the ones who are kind of the nosiest, who are the most willing to talk about things. But also which ones have a personality and a character that is conducive to giving medicine. Because a divination is ultimately, like I mentioned earlier, a form of medicine, right? You're prescribing treatments, including treatments
Mhm.
to confusion, treatments to being lost, being aimless, being disconnected from your spirits, being on a path of self-destruction, being on a path of worrying too much. And so I think, ideally it is a situation in which the spirit that is volunteering to help is one that you have confidence in, right? Now, it's rare that only one will volunteer for a question. You can poll the class, as it were. You can kind of like, okay, guys, what do you think? What does the council say? But so it's rarely just one spirit speaking, but there's usually one that will like enchant the oracle medium. So for example, like if you're doing cards, the one that will like go through the flow of the deck and will come
Mhm.
out the other end. And one thing that I like to do if I'm reading with whether it's playing cards or tarot, which I rarely read with either. Like if I read with cards, it's usually a Gypsy Oracle card deck that's really popular in the Balkans that I use. It's originally from Austria. If you know the one that I'm talking about, it's got like the green cover.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. So that one is I'll have the spirit like my main spirit come into the Rider card like Letterman style or the Joker card, cute Joker face paint, and then we live in a society. um, or into the Fool, and then whisper to the rest of the cards the question.
Mhm.
Like whatever is the most mercurial figure. And when it comes to my beings, of course, there's a whole prayer that I do, that anyone who's, gotten a reading from me has heard me utter in Serbian. And also there's certainly spirits that will come forward and then like form kind of like a circle around me and start giving their input.
Having a spirit that acts as a dedicated interpreter and mouthpiece for all of the other spirits involved, often who is a diviner themselves in life or, in whatever state of reality they might find themselves. That's always helpful. And I've had, a lot of people who come to me being like, when I sit down to divine, it's, just this garbled mess of fragments between spirits A, B, C, D, and E. And I'm like, okay, just tell spirit A that they're the one who can speak to you. All the rest of them
Mhm.
have to speak to spirit A. Then the message will be
I
passed on.
love that because one of the things that I encounter with clients, sometimes I get this rush of their spirits being like eager to speak on the topic, especially if they feel like it's been neglected for some time. So I will usually ask one of my main like warrior spirits to sort them, to kind of be a
Mhm.
bouncer, to be like line them up appropriately, let them deliver their messages in order, choose among from them a representative that will then speak that utterances to me. And if many spirits are coming, especially in like a spirit court reading kind of query, I will ask for like it's a time span of 1 hour that I do this for. So like I can't, I could go on for 16 hours, but like we can't. So I'll ask like the top 3 to 4 spirits that like really want to come out and be known and to give advice in medicine, not just so they can get offerings, but because they have the most relevant, medicine to dispense upon their client.
Right.
So I think it's kind of like a three-pronged approach, right? Have a set of spirits that you feel really confident being your diviners. And of course, if you have tools that are birthed specifically to speak on behalf of those spirits or are themselves the mouthpieces of those spirits, are guaranteed to speak for them, which, certain traditions literally create for you. You will have a spirit that will speak first, but the others ones can like certainly speak through their tools, but like it's with that spirit's consent and blessing. So you will have a particular team with like an oracle as its foundation. You will have a kind of warrior or bouncer, as I've called it, to help sort other people's spirits and kind of get everyone in line. And then you definitely want your kind of council that will still like, give
Yeah.
you alternative. Like, you want certain spirits. Like, I know who to go to if it's like an ancestor question. Don't neglect the importance of the dead of ancestors because especially diviner ancestors because they know how to deal with human clients. They know how to deal with human problems. They know how to deal with hunger and thirst and lust and impatience and greed and feeling worn out because you haven't gotten enough sleep or anxiety over money. Like these are spirits that like have lived that. And now if they've ancestralized, they also have additional wisdom because a dead person, is just a dead person. They're not necessarily better or stronger or smarter than they were in life. But someone who's gone through the ancestralization process and is more elevated, they do have additional wisdom to pass on to you that is unique for their station beyond the life that they actually had.
Right. Right. A lot of the time, the more structure and more reinforcement you can give to this entire process, not only is it easier on you when you have to go through like, multiple divinations in a day as a professional, but it's improves the results you give to your clients, which is really like the most important thing.
I also find that if you have a public practice, there will be a separate spirit that will step up to help you in that aspect. Like Salt, I remember when your books aren't open right now, but I remember when you started, you ended up having a pact with an angel that agreed to help with your natal readings. And in return, you actually, obviously good practice for an astrologer, but you had a pact with them about, secrecy and having clients' confidentiality be honored and so on, and also to dedicate the practice to that angel.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say a lot of the I mean, this is the thing, right? Like those kind of relationships, they go both ways. Like if spirit's role in that relationship is acknowledged, that means, whoever's receiving the reading is aware that that spirit's role is present
Mhm.
in the they're aware that the spirit is present in the divination, but at the same time, that spirit's also going to help you. It's going to help you both A, be correct, which is key, and B, also, frankly, help you develop as your skills, help you develop your practice because as your relationship with these divination spirits grow, your capacity to engage with these methods of divination is also going to grow in the same way, which is obviously, a very desirable outcome. And I would also say, like, when it comes to engaging with spirits, in respect to divination, in respect to reading for other people. Like it's as you said, like sometimes you need a bouncer, sometimes you need a spirit that's able to navigate the hierarchies of other people's spirit relationships and see through the various like webs that are going on that tying them
Mm,
together. Because that's what a lot of people come for nowadays. Like it's not like the 17th century when most people are going to be asking where's my stolen silverware, right? Like
mm.
a substantial portion of people coming to us today, they want to know specifically about their spirits. And ironically, that's harder in a lot of ways. So I think it becomes even more important to introduce these kind of concepts where relevant, specifically within the Western context, where this is kind of a different thing. Whereas, I imagine in West Africa, South Asia, East Asia, like people are already kind of asking about spirits as well to begin with. It's kind of something you would do, but here it's interestingly still somewhat new. Like probably since the 19th century, it's kind of only just recently started being done regularly. So I think it's something that is still kind of developing in the West, and I think it's taken a good direction more recently compared to how it might have been done 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You made a really good point about it's harder to divine for occultists. Not that's like actually like harder on us in the sense that like it's like a more difficult question to answer. It's more in the sense that like they're gonna want answers. It's not sufficient to say that like this is the person who stole your silverware. Your cow is struggling to produce milk for these reasons. Like or like this is the person that is your spouse is cheating on you with. Like go do these things to get them back. Like it's specifically like okay, but why did the spirit choose me? These are like esoteric questions, right? Like they're more philosophical in the sense that they want to know the reasons. And so certain, having the spirit of an occultist help you is really, really good. Having the spirit of a diviner who can help you do divination better is actually really, really helpful. Like these are the spirits that like, we often say that like get a necromancer to teach you necromancy. And it's so true. Like it's genuinely really helpful to have a spirit that actually remembers this. And there's usually an ancestor somewhere in there that will help, or you can purchase the dirt of somebody who was a famous medium who can help you as well. You can also create charms to assist you in facilitating spirit contact and facilitating spirit sight and helping you get into trance. And I think really it is a matter of ensuring that you've cultivated a certain level of stability and confidence with your spirits when asking these tough questions for yourself. Because results will be flavored by where your head's at. So reading when your head isn't clear because you need to figure something out when you have a lot of anxiety, when you want a particular outcome for a question really badly, flavors your reading. I've mentioned a few times before on the podcast that I think you can kind of get any answer you want at a divination. And I don't mean that divination is fake or is like charlatanry. Obviously, I would not be selling it if I thought that. It's specifically, and I'm interested to hear what you guys think about this as well. But my take on it is if you're not in sufficient trance, if you're not in like a level where, there's a difference between like you're shuffling cards randomly playing poker versus you're shuffling cards and like you're smoking tobacco, you're like there's incense in the air, you've put out a glass of water for your spirit, and you're feeling them like weigh on you, and then suddenly your hands just shift them in a position, and you know exactly when to stop and when to draw. And
Mhm.
that is a difference between randomness and divination, right? It's guided by the spirit. All divination requires some level of light trance, even if you don't think you're in trance. Like you don't think that necessarily you're like in a state like that. Like there is some degree to which you are in that mental state, and then you also have to be the interpreter of your own oracle, right? You don't just like
Mhm.
utter things and then someone else interprets for you. You are both, and so you have to be able to pull back and still be charismatic and be someone who can deliver the medicine in a way that is medicinal, right? We talked about that as well with like clients. Especially in when the three of us were on Mahigan's podcast, Sat Upon a Toadstool, we talked about this with clients. How do you ensure the person who is receiving the divination actually benefits from it? It's not your job to make the horse drink once you've led it to water, but it is important that like it is actionable for the client. It's not just a bunch of like vague prescriptions that like feel good philosophically to hear, but then they're left wondering, okay, what do I do practically? Our goal is always to make sure there's an immediate way they can put this into action. And that is necessary to do with trance because otherwise you're just cold reading, right? Or the
Mhm.
connection to spirit is not guaranteed.
Yeah, exactly. Like all divinations have to at some point come from either a spirit or a deity, if there are appropriate mechanisms to speak with them. So the and as an extension of that, there has to be some kind of trance going on. Like, I think that's, a fantastic point that you make whenever we talk about divination. Is that or rather you know it or not, if you are divining correctly, spirits are involved and they're giving input. Um, Beyond just that of the uh, spirit of the tool itself.
Yeah, and I think as well, like even our as Singer was saying, like we're looking for clarity, right? And so when we ourselves aren't clear, or when people around us aren't clear, potentially, we need ways to isolate that to purify that. Like I remember when Svinga would be throwing shells, like for her own sake or similar situations, and I'd be in the room and I'd be like, I'm going upstairs because I'm not in a great mood right now. So I don't want to bring
Hmm.
that energy. Energy being a very vague word here. I'm not really talking about energy model, just like the general vibe. Like I don't want to be bringing work into that divination, right? Like even just being in proximity to it is going to discolor things. So I'm out of there because I don't want to bring that into it. Like, and as when we're doing it for ourselves, it's the same thing. When we're engaging with our spirits in general, we want to kind of be careful about that, right? Like, if you're pissed off, don't go to your heated up spirits because they're going to feel that on you and they're going to get heated up. They're going to get aggy as well. Like, it's something to watch out for. And in divination, it's no different, right?
Exactly, exactly. And even just like you mentioned, like you leaving the room when I'm divining, another example of that is like, let's say I'm using a system and you don't know the question I'm asking or the questions I'm asking my spirits, but you do know what each of the throws mean, or you do know roughly if it's a yes, it's a no, it's a maybe, that's like a no leading to a possibility of yes. If you like know what the signs are, but you don't know what I'm asking, you could project the energy of like, oh, it's a no, oh shit, but you don't know what I asked that got the no answer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's sometimes important to not have people hovering over you. Like
Mhm.
this is really like when you're living with people, but also I think it also, means it's one thing for a client to see this. And that's fine because their energy is involved. And in fact, when it comes to bean divination, which isn't always done with beans, it can be done with corn. I usually have the client, if it's in person, count them for me, out of a set, or like peel the corn and like get 41 corn kernels out for me. That
Mhm.
puts their energy, for lack of a better term, into the medium. But like if it's just unnecessary kind of vibes being transferred, like that could also screw up the radio frequency between you and your spirits, right? So cultivating stability is something really important. Clearing your head is important. If you're anxious about the result, you can't just tell yourself, don't be anxious, bro. Like, it's still gonna be,
Right.
you're still gonna be worried. You still want to know the answer really badly. But finding a way to let go of the result a little bit at least, or finding a way to surrender to your spirits and be like, ultimately, my point is if you can't handle the no, like, and you really want it to be a yes, if you can't handle the responsibility of receiving the no, then you really can't handle the responsibility of receiving a yes. It's not going to make it better. So if you really don't want to be told no, then if it's a yes, then you're not ready to hear it. You're not ready to understand the responsibility that's involved because of how much of your own needs you're putting into this, right? Because this is meant to be medicinal. And you can't let yourself have your heart broken by your spirits when they give you the cold hard truth. It's really hard when you want something so bad and your spirits are telling you, no, not right for you, not going to work out. The path forward is laden with thorns. You will not only be hurt, but everyone around you will be hurt. This is going to suck, but you need to work on this right now. Otherwise, the future is going to be so much worse. And that can happen in so many directions, including jobs, including love, including money,
Mhm.
including so many things, right? Including spiritual matters, right? But ultimately, what's really important, I think, for being a good diviner, right, is being able to look into the heart of the question, being able to look at yourself, especially if it's about you, and realizing that ultimately your role is to receive the message, is to
Mhm.
perceive it, is to be receptacle of it. What happens next, but in the moment you need to just receive it without coloring it, without tainting it in any way, and also accept that like the human mind is fallible, spirit conduct is fallible, like spirits themselves are fallible, right?
Right.
Like being like they're not omniscient, and so no oracle is truly fully omniscient. Like some have a lot of authority because of the way that they're done, especially if it's like a life path reading. But ultimately, like there is still room for you. The whole point of sorcery is that there is room for things to be changed, right? The whole point of being given a
Right.
warning is so you can change it before the bad thing happens or comes.
Yeah, exactly. Like regardless of if the answer to a given question is yes or no, you should be walking away from that reading with increased agency.
Exactly.
Like the, the whole point
More
of,
options.
yes,
Mhm.
exactly. Like, and as a diviner, depending on whatever the answer is, leveraging that and having the skill and ability to be like, okay, in light of this no, do this. Or in light of this yes, do this. Or, now that we know that this is the case, here are your options.
Mhm.
Um, and, having both the skill to do that yourself and having the spirits to back it up.
Yeah. Another aspect of the who question is the right spirit for the right question.
Right.
Like, I've heard so many times on various occult forums, people talk about like, the kind of classic case of like business, right? Like money. Going to an angel about it, especially because angels don't have free will. They'll be like, here's how to get right with your religion, how to get right with God, how to get right with your life purpose. Here's like macro expansion that will take place over the course of like the next 20 years of your life. Here's like some like major arcs in your life that they're addressing. And then like
Mhm.
going to like a demon that you conjure and bind and like Visago, for example, and he'll be like, it's this, like very to the point, very like here's an example, but then there's also a bit of trickery in there because they're still demons. And they definitely trying to get one up on you. And then there's also the aspect to in which they'd be like, well, here's this way you could get all this money, you know, something, horribly someone dies and then you get the social, life insurance policy cashed out. So
Right.
it's definitely a matter of like what is the kind of spirit that is responding. There's certain spirits that like when it comes to love questions, like they want soulmate level romance and they will not entertain questions of hookups. Or like so if you're just interested in like how do I get laid more often, this spirit will not only not give a good answer for you, but it will probably scold you for wanting that. Whereas other spirits will be like, here's the answer.
Yeah.
It's this, and like, have this image in this way, like masturbate on a skull candle, like whatever, like they'll give you an answer. And so it's also a matter of like, don't shop around for diviners or spirits, but definitely
Mhm.
know, it's like with anything else. Like you don't go to a contract lawyer to talk about divorce. You don't go to a divorce lawyer to talk about property law, right?
All right.
Um, and so just know the specialist that you're consulting, which is again goes back to our first tip, which is are you willing to speak on this as a general question? Because that's a good way to ask, because maybe they don't want to talk about it. Or maybe they want to talk to you first and be like, why do you want to know this? And like checking with you that way.
Mhm.
But the second thing is, are you willing to answer this question in general? After that is who among you is the one that volunteers to talk about this?
And kind of on the client side of things with that too is, you'll know the professional you're going toward, and they'll have a particular matrix of spirits as dictated by, whatever tradition they may be participating in. But the exact uh specifics of it, like kind of prying and digging, it's like, that's the diviner's business. They're good with their spirits and are going to make sure you're good with yours, you know.
Yeah.
And past that, it's like, okay, we're generating answers, we're generating results here.
Yeah. And I guess another aspect of who that we kind of hinted at is who is your diviner? Because we're always
Mhm.
talking about like you being the diviner, but sometimes the reading result that I get will be like, talk to your godfather about this. Like most questions I feel comfortable answering for myself, but some of them I'm like, I need my priest to help me with this. I need my
Mhm.
mentor in beings to help me with this. I need somebody to help me directly in a way where this is my head and my ego is too in this and it's almost impossible to divorce. It is not a bad thing to recognize that. You can't always be distant from everything. Sometimes you do need somebody who is so uninvested in the answer being whatever, but so invested in you getting the medicine, right?
Mhm.
And that's an important nuance that they are willing to help and give that kind of, warning because like we talked about, like don't shop around for the right person in the sense of like seven diviners gave you, the answer to the question that you didn't want, and then the last one gave you the one that you wanted, and that's the person that's right. Uh, we've all had that client.
Mhm.
That's like unhappy with us because they didn't get the one that they wanted, and then they find someone who validates them and they're good. And that's also a warning against false positives for sure.
Right.
Be careful with false positives in that, like, like the poker deck, right? Sometimes you will get the answer you want just randomly. And not trying to scare anyone to be like, oh my God, it's so random and hard, but like there will be a feeling of things clicking. That's not just the feeling of, oh my God, that was the answer I definitely wanted. Like sometimes when you get the answer that you kind of low-key want, it's scarier, because
Yeah.
you're like, oh shit, and so I think it's just important that like whether it's shopping around for, diviners, again, check out the episode that we have with Mahegan on Set Upon a Toadstool because we talk about like how to choose a good professional for divination or for spell work, and like things to look out for with them, like reviews,
Mhm.
people who vouch for them, mentors who publicly vouch for them and certify them in their training. But ultimately, we want to make sure that you are confident the person is doing the divination for you. They're invested in you getting the medicine. They're not necessarily invested in the outcome of the question.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think like that you mentioned earlier, speaking to your priest, like sometimes you do need external opinions, even if you're the best diviner on the planet. Like sometimes your own biases are gonna get in the way of things. Sometimes you're gonna be thinking like, you're gonna have your own concerns, you're gonna bring your own thoughts into it. Like if you're paranoid about being abandoned or something like that, and it's gonna change the entire way you're looking at the question, right? Like so you need outside eyes to take a look at it and like assess it.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And I think something that you just raised so makes me think of like it's not a bad thing to be attached to a question. We've just been talking about like ridding yourself of that attachment, but it's not a bad thing when it's really important and it's like life-changing. Like it's not a bad thing to want a particular answer, but that's when you need to go to a different person.
Mhm. Definitely, yeah. And, as being on kind of the diviner side of things, if you have someone come to you that is asking, very serious questions that have equally serious implications, sometimes it doesn't hurt to go to your own elders or your own mentors and be like, can you take a look at this as well?
Yes, yes, hugely. I do this with certain ones where I'm like, okay, here is the result. Now I do live divination, obviously. So like it's
Hmm.
one thing, like if I get the sense the person tells me ahead of time, here's the question, I might feel that by a mentor if I feel like it's really necessary. But sometimes like afterwards I can be like, so I want to run this by somebody else. Ethically, I feel the need to do this. And obviously, like, I'm willing to work out a financial deal with them. This has not happened yet in my professional life, but like there's certainly times when I've been practicing a divination method under a mentor where I've been like, I want them to check this out
Hmm.
because I think it's necessary to kind of get that opinion to be like, what do you think this? I mean, and they'll be like, no, the advice you gave this person is correct. That is how I would interpret this. However, just be aware there are these additional things that could come up with this omen, and then I can email the client and be like, by the way, here's these additional things.
Yeah. 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 It's a huge help to be able to, lean on those people who taught you. And, it ultimately is better for the client.
Mhm. Moving on to the what. And it's funny because we're talking about formulating divination questions, and we don't just mean like how do you phrase them? We're talking about
Right.
like the open-ended philosophy of like divinatory inquiries. But the what is really what system divination, right? How are you gonna do? Because especially most of us practice more than one.
Mhm.
And sometimes the one that we do professionally for others isn't always the one we immediately consult for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, when it also kind of has some interplay with like the who side of things, like what spirit you're talking to. It's like, the spirit you go into a session with someone and you're like, okay, what spirit wants to speak on this? And then the spirit who prefers to use some completely different tool shows up and is like, I have the answer.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
And sometimes there's also, the use of multiple tools, right? Like for me at least, I'll use, generally speaking, like if there's a bunch of different questions of a very different nature or different spirits, as you said, want to answer things, or, sometimes it's just the right thing to do. Like there's multiple divination methods that you might use in any one session. Like it's not guaranteed to just be horror, it's not guaranteed to just be geomancy. It might be that you're looking at incense, you're looking at other things. Like there's all kinds of different approaches, and they are not necessarily always going to be the exact same every session. They're not always going to be the exact same. Even for,
Mhm.
you can get the same question and answer it in two different systems, right? Like, and sometimes you'll need to do that. It's that
hmm
flexibility is really important, I think. And diversity in method is very valuable for a number of reasons as a result.
Yeah, there's like a whole, matrix of things going on with the diviner, right? Because if someone's sitting across the table from me and I'm reading cards for them, I might also have a glass of water and I'm interpreting the omens of like the bubbles, the cloudiness, how it's rippling. If I'm smoking a cigarette, I'm reading the ash, I'm listening to the birds outside. I'm watching the person scrying them as much as the tools, and it's just this whole interplay of spiritual phenomena that gives you the fullest picture possible and allows you to give them the most accurate answer possible.
And it's interesting to the image with omens because auguries are such an important thing for all three of us.
Mm-hmm.
Even in systems where you think that wouldn't be the case. Like I know for a fact that all three of us use augury and omen divination with every system, regardless of what it is. Like I've seen Salt in person immediately know something based on the birds outside. And I've seen you when you're smoking a cigar, Key, like immediately like look at the ash and the way it falls, and you're like, oh, okay, got it. While
Mm-hmm.
the cigar is just helping you get in the trance otherwise too, but it's also its own divinatory medium. And for me, you guys have seen me throw the beans down. I haven't even begun to sort them into the piles to generate the chart, but I've looked at how it falls.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm also looking at like, are there random insects that are crawling around? Like, is there chirping outside? Like, what are the clouds like? So these
Yeah.
methods can all be layered together.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think as well, I mean, sometimes even the origins of these divination methods, right? Like I know looking at incense, for example, nowadays there's like very formulaic approaches, but originally it was actually, people were just lighting incense to call the immortals. And then people that were visiting these diviners saw that and they're like, oh, he must be reading the incense. It's just like, no, the incense was originally there as a method for calling them, like as a way to get them to come. Now they are. Now they're looking at the actual incense, that they're looking at the pattern as it burns, they're looking at the relative height to each other, they're looking at the color of the fire, the color of the smoke, how high, how quickly it ascends. Um, and I think that's honestly one of the things that's really beautiful about divination is that these systems are rarely dreamt of overnight, save in, very strong cases of revealed prophecy.
Hmm.
They come from engagement with spirits, they come from engagement with the world itself and observation. It's an observation based system, whether that's observation of spirits, of nature, and ways in which we engage with that, ways in which these things explain other circumstances. And I think being equipped with understanding of that is something that can be quite valuable, right? Because it teaches you, hey, why shouldn't you divine when it's a storm outside, potentially, like,
Hmm.
or similar circumstances. It lets you kind of understand the situations that are going to impact the consultation itself if you understand the connection between divination and these, I guess, external agents.
Hmm. I'm curious, so, because you can only really ask one question horary-wise within a certain amount of time. If you have multiple questions, what do you personally do?
So when it comes to horary specifically, if the questions are related, I can potentially answer them still.
Hmm.
So let's say you ask someone, "Oh yeah, me and X person, is this a thing?" And the answer is yes, no, whatever. It doesn't, the exact answer doesn't matter. And they ask right after, "Oh, how quickly?" And that one's kind of simple. You can just rely on the same kind of chart.
Hmm.
Now let's say, "Oh, also, how is my uncle doing?"
Hmm.
And in that case, you're going to have to look at something different. Now, how are we going to look at that? Well, there's a number of different methods, right? Like I could be looking at the nativity, I could be looking at the chronocritorship of the significator of his uncle, for example. That might be one option. It'd be a bit, I mean, uncle's a bit weird. Maybe let's switch the example to father. It's a little easier to do. Um, or we might use something else. Might use geomancy. I might use one of the two like yes no methods I have. I might use. It kind of depends. It depends, like we said, right? Like which spirits step up, which spirits want to answer the question. Because there are some spirits, especially for me at least, who I can engage with them, but they don't want to be bothered over like smaller stuff, or they don't want to take part in professional readings. Like they want to specifically work put on private stuff, I guess is the right way to say it. Um,
Hmm.
and then there are those who obviously patron that. They're always happy to engage with that. There are spirits that kind of want to be involved in everything. So it really does depend. Because for me, two of the divination methods I have are more general. Any spirit can speak through them, any spirit can engage with them. The rest of them are quite specific to very particular spirits. So it depends on what they're feeling. And also sometimes it depends what the like patient or client wants as well, right? Like what are they coming for specifically? So I would say in general, like yeah, there's a number of different methods that I'm going to use at any one time. Um, Hori is quite often a start, but not always, because Hori is very, I guess, specific. It's very particular, and I find it can be used for things that I don't personally use it for,
Hmm.
but I think there are better methods for it, really.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and where Hori specifically has its strengths is will X happen? Or
Hmm.
if you want to know the person coming to you, you want to know their thoughts. If you want to, it's called reading the heart. If you want to know what's on their mind, these two things, Hori is fantastic at. It's phenomenal. If you want to find out who stole something as well, it's also very good for that. Um, and anti witchcraft, it's probably I would genuinely say one of the best, if not the best, system of divination for anti witchcraft. But outside of those contexts, I quite often prefer other methods. It's just Hori's a funny one, I think.
Hmm. Gotcha, gotcha. Well, speaking of which, I think another thing to discuss for what is, when you're looking at like what system for what divination, technically any can answer any. Like Salt just gave a really good example of how Ori can
Mhm.
be used to answer so much, right? But also it's a matter of um, when you're petitioning your spirits and when you're opening up the oracle, what is the purity that you have going into it, right? We talked a little bit about having your mind clear, but I think also just making sure that your spirits are refreshed, that they have
Mhm.
offerings, that they're lit up a little bit, that they have something like a glass of water for clarity. You can ask them to filter out what is unclear, especially if it's a high stakes question, like
Mhm.
entrap it in the glass. You can then read the glass for bubbles or murkiness. So you can have multiple layers of divinatory oracles. Like one thing I like to do is divine using the glass of water. Look at how the candle's dripping. Like is the candle flame high? Is it flickering a lot? Like is it dancing in a certain direction or movement? Is the wax dripping only on one side? If you use shitty 7-day candles, they will burn weirdly anyway. Sometimes it's just physics. It's because they got bubbles in
Mhm.
there. And it's just like, don't worry if the wick buries itself. Normally, that's a really bad omen. Sometimes it just happens because the wick isn't really placed in there very well. So, figure it out. But if it's like a good, like a normal, like beeswax taper or something like that, you'll be able to figure it out, right?
Mhm.
And so that all for me forms the landscape of like the way that the question's being approached.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that's a really good point, is like just make sure your spirits are good before you start asking them things. Make sure your obligations are met, promises kept. Um, don't ask for more when you have not given your due. Um, because the second you call up those spirits and they're like, I'm not reading on this, I'm hungry. you know.
Literally though, sometimes they're just like, it's not that deep. The reason I'm not reading on this is because I'm hungry or because you and I are not done yet. Like there's
Mhm.
not beef between you, but there's like just a different thing we have to discuss first.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
They're
yeah.
like they're like, dude, we have something else to discuss. It is really important. And we have not really gotten to the stage where we can talk to each other about this question that you have. We got to discuss what our issue is.
Mhm. So yeah, just making sure that you're good with the spirit you're about to ask.
Hmm. Hmm.
Very awkward when that happens in front of a client. Hopefully it never
No
does.
fucking kidding. I've not had it happen in front of a client, but I have had spirits tap me on the shoulder and be like, after this session, we gotta talk about something.
Yeah.
Chill goes down my spine. I'm like, is everything okay? Turns out not even a big deal. They just want to remind me that like something's coming up.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's there's a funny story that I had with a very regular client of mine, um, where the spirit who I've, asked a million questions of for this person, um, just refused to open the oracle.
Hmm.
And I was like, dude, what is going on? And it ended up being the spirit going, dude, it's nighttime outside. Light a candle for me. And I'm like,
Mm.
fuck.
Give me some
Um,
light so I can shine light on
yeah,
this question.
exactly.
Hmm.
So it's just kind of those funny small details that when you catch it, and um, when you realize in the moment, it's all part of the process.
There's actually something I wanted to raise about that, which is sometimes the spirits are like, hey, the weather is off for this.
Yeah.
Like the weather is off, and maybe we're slipping into when now, I think, which is discussing the
Mhm.
kind of temporal nature of a lot of this stuff, which is like sometimes your spirits are like, one, like, let's talk again in another session, like you're getting tired. Let's do it
Mhm.
again another time. Or week, does that one famous like or like omen that can come up in most systems where it's like it's the one that says we can keep going forever, so we shouldn't. Like there are a million
Mhm.
questions. Let's pause this for now. But I get omens that are like tell the client everything you're being told, including the stuff that normally I keep to myself, because it's not like I'm hiding something. It's more like some information is more for me, when
Mhm.
spirit's saying like, check this. And know this about the client or know this about their spirits. And sometimes it's just like they're like, tell them everything that comes to your mind. Like let it all be stream of consciousness because they are suited to hear that. And
Mhm.
other times they're
Mhm.
just like, no, like vice grip on what you're doing right now. And narrow it down this way. It's nothing to do with the client per se, and it's more to do with how to deliver to them as medicine. And
Yeah.
I've been on the receiving end of both of those divinations.
Likewise, yeah. It's always fun. But it's it's always the right medicine for the right situation.
Hmm.
The I think as well, you know, obeying the omens as they fall,
Hmm.
for when a chart should not be read or
Hmm.
when a fall should not be interpreted, is really important. um, I notice a lot of people, um, maybe being more flexible about them than I am.
Hmm.
And with the omens coming through geomancy famously, but a number of other systems of when not to interpret the chart, um, noticing that sometimes people can be a bit flippant about that. Um, but I've become a lot more like these omens are here for a reason. Um, Kind of famously, either the querent is not in a good state to receive this information right now, which is fantastic just to have right away. Or if worse comes to worse, the querent is lying to you, Rubius in the first house or various other placements. So knowing when not to read. Similarly, within geomancy and also astrology, like the radicality of the chart must be present, or else it shouldn't be read.
Hmm.
And I think, on the flip side of that, when there are omens of, don't read this chart, um, if you don't like the answer, reading that chart again or generating a new one, asking the same question, be it in that session if you're really desperate or later on, if, you send out a spirit on a task and you're constantly in their ear pestering them of like, hey, when's this getting done? When's this getting done? Eventually that spirit might get a little distracted or a little frustrated with you.
Yeah, yeah, following up to many times on the same question, which is difficult. I mean, I th we might have touched on that a little bit in the troubleshooting your sorcery episode, but like don't put all your eggs in the same basket. Like don't just keep bothering the energy or the spirits involved.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind of like, it reminds me of what you were talking about earlier, where it's like when you kind of know what that spirit is up to, so you're
Mm,
watching it and you're kind of interpreting certain things as happening as like the, oh shit, that's what's up.
mm.
Similarly, that interference applies here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think, with the same thing of like asking the same spirit, the same question over and over again and them getting annoyed, you know, if you don't like the answer, especially, uh, don't go to multiple diviners when you don't like the answer until you find the one who will affirm you.
Yeah, yeah. We talked about it already, but I think it's just a good thing to emphasize about the responsibility of receiving the answer.
Mhm.
It can't just go your way. It has to bring actual truth and clarity, even if
Right.
there's, a mourning period, even if there's like of expectations not being met, right? I get that a lot with people who really are interested in being told they have a certain kind of spirit pact. which is what I was referencing earlier when I mentioned like, oh, the problem is like, what if you really want this and then the answer is no, and like you are really hoping to be prevented from knowing this or that you didn't want some like bad future to occur. Like it's often with spirit pacts really where I get that situation come up. The most is because I get a lot of people who are really interested in knowing what their courts are or interested in knowing if they have certain kinds of bonds with certain spirits. But like being told no is medicinal, right?
Hmm.
Like, and I'm not saying that I'm like the ultimate authority on this. Like, get another opinion, absolutely. If you're trusting me with the answer, then you're trusting me with the answer. But I'm not offended if you want to get another person's opinion. And oftentimes I'll even advise it to be like, someone else might see a different angle of this that could be helpful too.
Hmm.
But it shouldn't necessarily, if we're both good diviners, it shouldn't be a drastically different answer. It should be the same ultimate verdict, but with different nuances. So ultimately, you really just want to make sure that because you can't handle the yes of like the spirit is there, and you have to now take care of that particular pact or deal with
Hmm.
the consequences of if it's not so good. If you also can't handle the no, it's not there. And people get attached to certain outcomes. They want certain things because it's cool or fashionable too, or
Right.
because it just would fit a particular pattern in their life that they feel like this is naturally the outcome. But it make many, many, many things and many omens can come about for many reasons, which is what like a really good diviner is able to do. It's the reason why all three of us recommend people to our good friend and colleague Rose Aurora for fairy-related issues. Is anything to do with the good
Hmm.
neighbors we sent to her, because she's tried and true and tested in dealing with a class of spirits that are notoriously particular,
Yeah.
and whose even the way you phrase things to them is going to color the outcome so much. Not to mention that they're dangerous.
Hmm. Yeah. It takes a lot of training to do at all, and it takes a certain gift to do right. And she has both those in spades. So,
Hmm. And not to mention profoundly ethical
mhm.
in
Yeah.
delivering the answer, whether the client likes it or not.
Yeah. Exactly. Because, the last thing that I think any of us want to do is leave people, without a way to go.
Yeah.
Um, and, be that, if the answers are no, here are more options. Magic is an art of miracles, so there's more to do.
Yeah, yeah. Because
And
like that's just so what I try and do with the spirit court stuff is
mhm,
if it's not what you were hoping for, it doesn't mean that you're not worthy of spirits or your relationships.
exactly,
So
yeah.
let's look into the ones that are around you that are eager to form a relationship with you and the ones that where the potential for forming a good relationship is extremely high and conducive.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like, if the answer is a yes, sometimes the last thing I want to do is say, okay, you now have an incredibly expensive mouth to feed, and you're not going to sleep for 4 nights of the month every year.
Yeah, genuinely.
But when those things do shake out, same deal. It's like
Hmm.
here are tools, or here are people I know who have the tools.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, speaking of over divination blocking your result and these kinds of things, we do have like a where question, which, it may be a little curious to ask for divination, like why does place matter? But more than you might think.
Yeah, I think where is a really relevant question, especially like we briefly mentioned earlier, omens, right, and augury. And that's another really, really useful tool because if you're in a position where you can observe these things, especially augury, especially the movement of birds, but even cloud patterns in the sky, right? Like if you're doing it in the outdoors, there's a whole lot of information you can gather from that. And obviously, at the same time, it's going to have, like we also touched on this, like the influence on the actual divination itself. I think geomancy is probably the most well known for being affected by storms. At least, Greer mentions it in his textbook, and he's obviously drawing on some prior sources.
Mhm.
But this goes beyond just geomancy; it goes into any kind of divination. Like there are going to be spirits that prefer nocturnal versus diurnal uh, consultations, right? Like the spirits are active at night, they're active during the day. So potentially the spirit that shows up to answer the question, you're less likely to get, I don't know, a wandering ghost in the daytime, for example, who is related to this question
Mhm.
somehow. You're less likely to get them just randomly turning up with permission of your spirits and being like, hey, I have a little bit of knowledge about this, right? Whereas if you ask at night, he might be there. Um, so I think that also kind of fits into time as well. But time is related to space, so time, when and where are kind of related in that way. And I think one of the big things though that comes to my mind when we talk about like when and where is astral omens as well. um,
Mm-hmm.
which is slept on quite a lot. But when we're talking about things like heliacal risings, eclipses, and so on, like it's not just you don't just look at these astrologically. You also look at these in terms of their actual omens. So you observe them. You look at the phenomena itself. You look at the coloring, the size, the dimness, the brightness. There's so many like factors that come into play here, and of course you also have the animal world, the I guess natural world we could call it, like animals, creatures, rivers, for example. Like if you're doing a consultation in, I guess, a natural environment, then there's a lot of things that you can be observing because, and this is more relevant to like larger scale questions, right? It's probably not going to give you information on individual private relationships, but the state of the world around us is what our divinations are tapping into in the first place, if not directly from the mouths of the spirits. You know, the world itself is a big old spirit. So it's good to keep an eye on these changes. It's good to kind of be aware of them as we divine and the influences that they can have on these divinations, especially when we get into things like mundane astrology or politics or large, long term economic questions, right? Like if
Mhm.
you're asking questions about, let's say, food scarcity, it's going to be good to be doing that from a place where there's agriculture involved because A, thing you can observe the space around you as an indicator. B, your spirits are close to those things now. They're close, you know, they're here
Mm-hmm.
to answer your questions. Well, he can go over there, speak to the spirits who live in the farm, right? They can get
Mhm.
information from them. They can talk to them. And obviously, you know, spirits can move quickly usually, especially the ones that are answering questions. I think is it Mephistopheles? He goes as fast as the wind, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, but they can, you know, having that kind of proximity, that access to them allows them to inform our questions, allows us to kind of garner judgments. And so for really, really serious questions, for things that are on a very large scale and very serious subjects, it can be very useful to kind of choose the location as well. It's not something you're necessarily going to do that often. It's probably not something you're going to do for professional readings, realistically, right? Like it's better to be, because quite often the best place to be is right in front of your shrines, right in front of all your tools, right in front of all your working environments. But sometimes there's, you know, it's beneficial to be at the right time and right at the right place.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Such a good point. I really appreciate you raising it.
And I think like that's kind of one of the main benefits in kind of doing your readings in a specific place as well. Like at the same time, is your spirits know that's where you're going to be when you're doing your consultations. Like
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
singers, you have your little spot that we're aware of.
It is indeed my spot. And I think that goes to do with like the mat that you throw your tools on, like a consecrated like placemat, or like, for beans it should be a red cloth with white beans on it for at least my training, but it doesn't have to be for everyone. Or like even just having a particular there's a purity zone about it, right? Like you know that you've showered, you know that you're clean, you know that you've refreshed your mind, that you're not coming into it kind of like gloomy, or particularly
Mhm.
distressed. Or if you are, you're at least able to distance yourself enough from it. Like there's all of this has to do with like the weather timing hygiene of it. And then for those of us who use systems that have to check things, like there is a Mongolian ancestor to the bean divination that I use that uses stones, and you have to check if the hour of the question being asked, the Chinese zodiac animal that rules that hour is appropriate to the question and appropriate to you, given who rules your birth year and the
Mhm.
client. So there's other things you can check too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which mercifully I don't have to do with the bean divination that I do, but there are still things that I will check.
Mhm.
And some people love a planetary hour. I think all three of us kind of love a planetary hour, but being beholden to that too much can also prevent you from living your
Mhm.
life. Sometimes like we were talking about this on a server like a while back, but like sometimes the best time to pray to Aphrodite is when you want to pray to her, not waiting for a Friday.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I it's like having that understanding that you can do pretty much anything anytime if you're clever about it and have the, tools and skills to do so. It's just a matter of, you know, knowing those influences will still flavor and texture what you're trying to do.
Hmm.
So, and leveraging that to your advantage as opposed to allowing it to be an obstacle.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. I mean, even as probably, I'd say I'm probably the more conservative out of the three of us when it comes to timing for fairly obvious reasons in elections. But like, even then, like, okay, you can't necessarily make a Picatrix talisman outside of an election, sure. But what you can do is you can make a natural, a natural image or some kind of like
Mhm.
simple talisman, or just utilizing the basic properties of natural magic to use those planetary influences that are inherent to a particular herb, to a particular stone, to an animal. Like, there's all kinds of options, all kinds of approaches, right? And I think that's something that you don't have to go ride or die. It's recognizing the nuances present in both, approaches, and understanding them, understanding their distinctions from each other and how you can use them, why you would use them. Like, that's one of the things actually we're kind of trying to do with the almanac is the elections in there aren't like full-blown horoscopic elections that you'd find in the Picatrix or that Agrippa recommends in his second book, right? They're simplified natural magic. It's
Mhm.
usually based on certain like very broad ecliptic positions because that's frankly what a lot of natural magic was. It wasn't all this like intensive horoscopic stuff. It was often quite simple. It was, especially in like the medical community where they didn't really vibe with horoscopic judgment. They didn't vibe with judicial astrology. They wanted specifically these kind of simplified natural approaches. Um,
Mhm.
and that's kind of one of the things that is really important to emphasize is like these distinctions are very much present and are very much relevant, but they're not really ruling things out strictly. There's kind of ways around them, and engaging with them and understanding them directly is really valuable for knowing how to navigate these kind of, I guess, if statements.
Mhm.
Such a good point. I love the historical perspective you brought in there as well, with that shift from like what does it mean to want a particular diagnosis versus like a natural magic remedy?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, we obviously have Simon Foreman, Richard Napier, who are doing full horoscopy, but like, you look at medical textbooks at the time, and quite often they're not using full horoscopy. They're kind of saying, hey, the moon in this position. I mean, we even have it in the magical treatise of Solomon, right? Like,
Yeah.
on the Heptameron, like, there's this very simplified approach based on ecliptic coordinates. And these are not invalid astrologically. They're just operating on very simplified principles that are still relevant, still very much useful for us.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Um, and it's just good to have both of those in the toolkit. It's
Yeah.
the because these have electional properties, which obviously ties into divination. Elections come from divination. Um, it's basically, a form of divination turned to practicality. So in that respect, like, you kind of want to, you know, blend them where appropriate.
Hmm.
Yeah. Like if someone is at my table today and I need to do something for them or make something for them, I can't wait 3 weeks until it's perfect. I have to do something within the next hour. That's good enough.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's also the role of those spirit packs that you have, that you're able to make them work just as hard as an election within
Mhm.
the hour because you have that relationship, you've built up that practice, that spirit is tried and true and tested in their power and their methodology, and you have that kind of accumulated power built up with them that like breathing on a leaf that you've put their name on it and then burning that to
Mhm.
ash is enough of a medicine as a very specifically constructed election.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like if someone is infested with something, I'm going to go outside, get a leaf of milkweed, bust the sap out of it and draw the image, you
Yeah.
know, and that'll get the bugs out.
Totally. Or you can go do the Coptic magic papyrus with
Yes.
Aphrodite's name on it,
Yeah.
descending into the letters.
The
Yes.
door. The
The
door.
door. Oh, my God, have I used that for my parents whenever they've had like an issue with a woodpecker?
Hmm. Did you ever think that our three brains would be collectively so damaged by papyrus?
On God, the frightful howls curl of a papyrus.
It's the best font out there.
It's truly, truly. God, I do
Oh
love that
man.
font though. I am an unironic papyrus font, apologist.
Hmm.
Like, yes, everyone uses it for their like random labels, and you know what? It slaps. If you don't think it's cool, I don't care.
Just remember, submit your schoolwork in Comic Sans as well, guys.
Facts, facts, facts.
Teachers love it instantly. Your
Little
professors will
clown
thank you.
art, clip art in the background too.
Oh yeah, yeah. Don't forget the Clippy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Little graphic design's my passion. And so, speaking of passions, the why. Why are you asking the question? What are you asking it for? We mentioned dreams, right?
Hmm.
Uh, crazy dream. Only two things you gotta ask. One, is the spiritual relevant? Yes or no? If no, no worries. Don't worry about it. If yes, okay. You can ask your spirits, do I need to worry about it? And if the
Yeah.
answer is no and it's spiritual relevant, don't worry about it. It's the spirit literally was clipping like Mario 64 clipping through your body while you were having the dream, or just bumped foreheads with you while you were sleeping. Stuff happened and you're fine. Or don't worry about it, they've already taken care of it. Like when like the oh my God, we talked about this with like the episode that we did on your wards, right? Episode
Yeah.
13. We were like, listen, like if they're like, yeah, someone broke through your wards, but we took care of it. You do not have to sit there and be like, who was it? And like name every possible enemy or everyone you think is jealous of you or everyone who might have come across your profile and tried to like siphon some luck off of your profile picture. It is fine. You know,
Hmm.
like just trust. The whole point of having protection is just to not worry about it and to not, because like the downfall of many magicians that I have personally known in my short life has been over defining on like perceived enemies and getting really
Hmm.
paranoid about that and being like, this person's talking about me, this person's talking shit about me, this person probably, who cares? You know, like magicians are notorious gossips and tend not to be very good ethical people. Um, and that's one of those things you gotta just like live with. Like, you know, we're so grateful for the friendships that we do and to have such a solid community around us. But like, whatever, you don't really know everyone that well until you really know them. And their ethics have been tried and true tested in situations in which they are not comfortable, in which they are not doing well, and in which they are not in a position of advantage, right? That's when you get to see people's actual personalities take shape. And
Hmm.
so really just don't worry about it. You know? But I
Yeah.
also think that with the dreams too, is just like, is it from a spirit? Is it relevant? Yes. Do you need to worry about it? No. Cool. And if you do need to worry about it, that's when you can ask them, okay, who among you gave me this dream? What do I need to know about it? What is the
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the thing as well, right? Like sometimes, let's say someone does have a fixation, like, oh, I'm always being cursed, blah, blah, blah. And let's say this is one of the rare occasions when they actually do have that issue going on. Sometimes, like, the best solution is just tell them, like, okay, just regularly do some stuff to break it. Like, if you're worried about people gossiping, okay, stake a tongue every fucking morning.
Every
Don't ask
morning.
questions about it every morning. Just stake a tongue. Yeah,
No one
if they're
can
that
talk
worried,
about me ever.
yeah.
Ever, ever, ever. Or maybe
Listen,
maybe like work the same tongue until it gets all maggoty.
Mhm.
Or you know what? Or do like the salt, you know, like the kind of Egyptian style, like making one out of clay and then
mm-hmm.
breaking it like that, or making one out of cake and breaking it.
Oh yeah, I genuinely like. I think any magician has to do anti-gossip stuff, but it's one of those good little housekeeping things, right? But like, I think it's really important not to play into certain paranoias with these oracles, with these
Yes.
divinations. Like,
Mhm.
you have to, if you are aware of that in yourself, you need to find someone who is reliable and trustworthy to bring that to, who's going to tell you, no, shut up, in a friendly way, not obviously in those words. And B, you probably need someone who's going to recommend you something actionable. That even if because if it's becoming a prominent issue for someone to be suspecting that all of the time, you're going to need some way to kind of deal with that, and hopefully some kind of regular practice intended to address that
Mhm.
will be part of the process of getting past that kind of anxiety and concern, right?
Absolutely, yeah. That's such a good point. And I think that, you know, just because something is a problem doesn't mean it has to be your problem.
Mhm.
So letting your spirits take care of things and handle things, and being aware that there are certain classes of spirits that are more than happy to creep in and be like, yes, everyone is out to get you. And the truth of the matter is like, and also playing on like, you know, the best lie involves a kernel of truth, right? Um, there are parasites who will pretend to be your ancestors, will pretend to be your spirits that will mimic them, pretend to be them. and will speak through your divinatory materials.
Mhm.
Parasites, Goombas, whatever you want to call them, that is a thing. And so what you can do in that case is make sure your items are clean, that your deck of cards is cleansed, or you have a fresh one out, that, you've sprayed your tools with alcohol, or that you've, smoked them to incense, that you've gotten, your purification on, and especially if you know it's a heavy question, and that your spirits are all fed, candles lit, glasses of water clear, um, little pre-oracle, check,
Mhm.
engine light check, that kind of thing. And then ultimately, I find that if you have a strong ancestral practice, you're good to go. Like your ancestors, if you know what they
Yeah.
feel like and you know who they are, you're not going to mistake them necessarily that easily for parasites. But just be aware that our bad thoughts, including like a spiraling, kind of not really doing a good job of taking care of yourself and your spirits, that kind of thing, or your emotional relationships. If you're just kind of like, um, like key when what you refer to as boy rotting.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that is important, right? And
Mhm.
then transitioning from that, like asking about you might also want to ask questions and formulate them based on timing. Like when will this manifest? Few weeks, few months? Like what is our time scale of this? You might want to ask for recipes. Is this sufficient? Do I need more? Do I need less? Is it that important that this ingredient is part of it, or is it a bonus? Like what is necessary to make this magic work? What is a bonus? And if you are an
Mhm.
overachiever, like the three of us are, you can absolutely go all the way out and get everything for spirits. But one thing I appreciate for that all of three of us have really benefited from hearing is sometimes the spirits being like, no, don't overcomplicate it. I did
Yeah.
just say three leaves. I did not say three genii,
Yeah.
of plants. Like I did say just the three. No, we can work miracles with those three. And yes, they all grow in your garden. It's not that deep.
Yeah. Yeah. I love to overcomplicate. So it's been good
You're the
medicine.
king of overcomplicating because you just love to go all out and be like, we can do this, we can do that, we can construct this in the right hour and do this. And then you go
Mhm.
to Salt and you're like, my boy, I need a fucking election. I need this, I need that. And then and next thing you know, your spirits are like, did you know that the plants that you have in your apartment have heard every prayer you've ever uttered and have breathed the air of everything you've ever smoked in this place
Yeah.
and know your secrets inside and out? So like, yes, one twig will do what, the plant on the roadside cannot.
Exactly. Yeah. And just slowing down and figuring that out, has been fantastic.
Mhm.
The And one of the things as well is like kind of as an extension of that impulse to overcomplicate. Um Magicians love to need to know.
Facts.
Um
Oh, me too.
yeah, which mood. But sometimes when you are, really vibing with your spirits, you're in a session, everything is flowing, and phenomena start to happen.
Mhm.
Not everything needs to stop because the spirit just moves something into your hand for you.
Yes, also when you get used to like spirits just doing shit, like my
Yeah.
I'm used to them moving things around. This is not unusual for me. Like it doesn't spook me because I'm just like, yeah, obviously, like just random
Mhm.
sounds and sights and stuff like that. But also, it doesn't have to. I don't have to stop everything to look at that. I can just keep going. Because then giving something too much attention or naming it or being like, oh my God, this thing is happening to me. I'm starting to tremble. I'm starting to feel the spirits. That identifies you with the ego so much that then it's not about a spirit anymore. Like it
Mhm.
stops the trance because now it's just about, oh, it's happening to me. And then your mind is reasserting its ego over your body by attributing the agency to you and that you're feeling it. You're going through the experience. And this is doubly true for divination, not just for trance, because obviously
Mhm.
trance is a part of divination, as we mentioned. But ultimately, you don't want to be in a situation where you're like, oh, yeah, like I'm feeling it. Like, oh my God, like I'm really feeling my divining spirit. Like I'm really seeing these cards move and their shapes change before me. Oh my God, like did the emperor just blink? Oh, he's looking to the side. Where is he looking at? He's looking at the lovers. Like no, like don't worry about it. Because then it's all about you and how you're feeling it, right? Like the need to know thing, like sometimes like you really know you made it with your spirits when they keep you on a need to know basis. It's to not
Yeah.
stress you out. Too much information, as much as we all want it, um, gives you too much shit to do and worry about. The whole point of some of this stuff is to automate at some point to be like, no, my spirit team has got this. I don't have to worry about it. If I do, they will let me know. Which I think, in addition to episode 9, the divination primer episode, I think the episode that we did, number 13, So You Think You Can Word, is a really good one on this. Good to revisit on protection magic, because that obviously has to do with helping you with divination questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And, just all of it feeding into itself.
It insists upon itself. We've been talking about
Oh, fuck.
what an what an ONAT is. Ah, sorry, it's a Family Guy reference. The Godfather insists upon itself. And it's so like oh no, not the definition. Like,
Oh, man. That one got me. That one fucking got me.
I'll be here all night,
Ugh.
folks.
Not the indexality of Al-Kindi. Um,
God. We'll put that meme that you made key in the show notes for this one for the patrons because it's pretty nasty.
Oh man.
It's like not the Luso Guattari reading of the Picatrix,
Oh
embracing the
my fucking
indexality of
god.
Al-Kindi's theory of arrays. Like what a word salad that only Key's mind could have produced.
That's some of my finest work.
Like three people will love what we just said.
Yeah. If you get it, message me. I need someone to send this insanity to. Oh man.
But
Oh.
I think finally the how. Because we can talk about the why forever, we can talk about like specificity and stuff like that, but like really the how is how do you phrase the question? Which is funny
Right.
because I think that's probably what people think we're going to talk about given the name of the episode, but it's really last, which is the open-endedness versus the specificity. It needs to serve the medicine that is being given to you. So the open-endedness, like if there are a plethora of opportunities and you are willing to go where the wind takes you, make it open. If you need a specific constraint upon it, like this has to work within a particular time, it's like petitions, right? You need it to
Mhm.
manifest sooner rather than later. You need it to be this particular thing. Like, do you need this job to work or a job like it to work, right? Because sometimes it's like it's not this job is perfect, but another one could also be perfect. You're just not aware of it. This is the only one that you're unaware of and you're applying to. But then in a week and a half, you find out here's another one that's even better for you. And it's recommended to you directly by someone you know, so you have that nice little human contact angle of it, right? And it's more
Mhm.
enchantable in some ways. Like, so for phrasing the question, um, make your heart open to the answer before you phrase it, and then articulate it to your spirits in the best way that you can through saying that like I need the medicine for this or like I need to know this information or this information must be revealed to me for these reasons and just
Mhm.
let it come through. It doesn't really matter how you put it. I often don't think it's that deep actually, ironically.
Yeah,
But I do find the most important thing, especially when I'm dividing for a client, is total openness to the answer and total openness to the best way that I could be a funnel for the medicine for them and likewise for myself if I'm dividing for me. Because I definitely am not the person who thinks you can't define for yourself. Is it easier to have someone else do it? Totally. But
Mhm.
I think that when you're doing it for yourself, it's really making sure that you are not constraining the question to such an extent that you are now narrowing the possibility for how the medicine can approach you.
Definitely, yeah. And I think like, when you're going for specific outcomes, cutting out as many points as possible in which you can get mired into the weeds of, how to do something, when something will happen. Um, just avoiding that to create these snares, to create these kind of mental loops that can block our own results. Like if you have a recipe, just ask your spirits, is this recipe good to do this thing? And if the answer is yes, go for it.
Hmm.
So many steps are cut out right there.
Hmm.
And if they're like no, then you can figure it out. But
You could even go so far as to say, like, this is what I needed to do. Like, would you improve upon this? Or
yeah.
is this sufficient? And it's not a bad thing to be told it's sufficient. Like it doesn't mean
Exactly.
that like, oh, well, actually, if you phrased it better, you would know that there's this really secret ingredient you could add that would boost it. Because you're just asking, like, I need this result to be achieved. Bottom, like
Mhm.
hook, line, and sinker. That's what I need.
Yeah. And it's oftentimes a really good thing to have that yes come down because then you can point to your spirits and be like, you said it'll work, so
Hmm.
it better work.
Oh yeah, we've talked about this a lot. Making your spirits be like, hey, in divination, you said this would work. Pay up. Make sure
Yeah.
it's actually working now. You said this working would do the trick. Make it work.
Hmm. And it goes back to, the points that we've made in the episodes that we've referenced so far, where it's like, don't pay spirits for work they don't do.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's also part of choosing the right spirit for the question, right? We've talked about it a lot before the who, but it's good to circle back a little bit for that, which is just ensuring that the spirit is the kind that you could rely on for this medicine. Like Salt's angel pact for his astrology, like that angel, if you knew who it was, guaranteed, you would understand like why that is the ideal spirit for assisting him with this.
Like, yeah, it's definitely a matter of you have to think about the way that you're approaching these and the way that the spirits are going to interface with that. Like, you also want to think about what kind of questions are going to come to you, right? Because when the spirits answering that, like if you spend half your time doing love consultations and you have a spirit who genuinely does not give a fuck about people's relationships, you might run into some issues.
Yeah, so true. And then also just making sure that, you have when you're going through the answer, is it the right one? Right?
Yeah.
When you phrased your question, when you've said, okay, like this is what I need to know, this is the scope of the question, this is the particular answer that I need revealed to me, be it in whatever manner it does, but I need this information specifically. Give it to me. Like, for example, who stole this wallet? Very simply. Or like, what is the nature of the spirit? I need to know, like, when it comes to nature, I need to know what are their virtues, what are they good at, what are they bad at, what are the signs they bring with them in the reading. And like your cards may show you that, but you'll also get bodily sensations when you're dividing. You might get visions when you're dividing. You're scrying your implements, right? You'll hear things. This is all part of the divination. The physical implement is a tool to lock into the question. It becomes programmed that way. And of course, we all know we can use our divination tools afterwards for things, especially if they are recyclable, as it were. Like if they're cards or if they're beans, you can use them for things. Like it captures the essence of a good reading. We can now be like, oh, the love answer for your client was really good. Let them keep the lover's card. Let them keep the
Hmm.
let them keep the two of hearts or whatever it is that came up, and use that in work. But then also, for the beans, I will give the beans to people and be like, oh, this was really positive. Put this in a red cloth and hang it over your bed. But or like cook them and feed them to your lover, whatever. And so it's wasn't like beans are versatile, but you also want to make sure that you have this particular room for making sure the answer is the right one. Radicality is something that both Salt and Key have raised, but being in sufficient trance is also really important too, as you mentioned.
Hmm.
I would
Yeah.
say though, maybe don't overthink. Is it the right answer? Because you might get like one, and then you're like, oh shit, but was it right? Like that's also
Hmm.
part of that's also like part, I think, of just making sure that you get to be a part of the magic in an appropriate way, where you're also just surrendering to the wisdom of your spirits too.
Yeah. Yeah. Like some of the most, profound readings I've received in my life have taken the form of, a minute long conversation where it's like, yep, everything's great.
Yeah,
And
and also then like the omens are there too. Where you're like,
yeah.
wait, everything is weirdly great. Like I'm overthinking it, or I'm just paranoid, or I'm just anxious. And for those of us prone to anxiety, I think divination can be a huge medicine, right? In a sense that like now we have a way to confirm things. It can also be a curse, and that now you want to check everything. Like like I've had a client who like basically wanted to keep coming back every month to ask, does he still love me type stuff.
Hmm.
And I was like, that attitude that you're bringing to me and you're willing to hire me for this amount of money every month about it shows that you're not in a good place in your ability to receive a relationship in general.
Hmm.
So like I would work on that first. And I just turned him down. I'm like, I'm not dividing on this. I'm not taking your money. I don't care how much money it would make from you. Like it's not ethical for me to like pursue this with you. And also like you need to figure it out yourself. Another example too is like again, we mentioned like, am I being cursed? Am I being cursed? Because the one time the answer is yes, because someone evil-eyed them or something on the street because they like, like a jaywalked or something, like it's just gonna validate everything for them.
Hmm.
And like I knew it, everyone's jealous of me, la la, la, right? Everyone's out to get me. And then also if you're in the public eye, you will be cursed. Absolutely. Someone's gonna evil eye you the second you're in public. So like hopefully your protections are good enough and you're doing regular cleansing. Making sure that like someone isn't beating you down while you're low. It's hard to have good spiritual hygiene when we're in a bad mood or when we're going through hard things, but that's when it's most important to connect with our spirits so that we can be good people for our friends. We can be there for our, the people who are close to us. We can be there for ourselves and show up, right? And divination cannot become a way of self-harm, where we're just like
Mhm.
asking the same question over and over again. We're getting bad answers because we're not in trance appropriately. And next thing you know, you're getting your heart broken because you're getting all these bad omens that are coming up in the chart, which sometimes isn't really the spirits saying like, oh, it's bad. They're saying you're in a bad place. Let's pause. Like my spirits have shocked me sometimes with like intense omens where I'm like, there is no way it's that bad. And what they're saying is pause, stop divining, let's talk. And that's, I guess, the final advice I want to give people for this episode, which is be ready to receive that sometimes. The pause, don't worry about it. We gotta talk though. Like, let's not think about this right now. Let's just you and me. No, I don't need additional candles. It's not about offerings. It's about you and me making sure you're in a good headspace because you care about us. We care about you. We want to make sure that you're good. And right now, you can't be giving medicine to a head that is not listening or that is being stubborn. Which
Mhm.
notoriously, I think out of all clients that I've ever had, and I'm including myself in this bracket, occultists are the hardest people to divine for because they are the most stubborn. They're like,
Yeah.
nope, I'm in command, or nope, I know better, or like, nope, you know, there's so many things that can come up. Or even like, no, 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 you don't understand, it's actually bad when it's good. Or being like, no, 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 you don't understand, it's actually good when it's bad. Like, it's just that, I mean, you have to be a stubborn creature to be a magician. You have to have serious, kind of particular arrogance to look at the
Mhm.
world and be like, nope, not good enough. I'm changing this. I'm using magic to change it. Which, God bless all of us for doing that. But ultimately, the humility is really important. I have often said that I think the best quality of a magician is ambition, humility, and equal measure.
Mhm.
Because you need to be ready to go all out and go hard swinging, right? Like get what you want out of magic, get the miracles, hone your craft until that is what's happening. But at the same time, have the humility to not make it about you. It's not about arrogance on one side of being too self-absorbed. It's also not about too much self-loathing on the other side, where you're still too obsessed with yourself. But it's just about how, woe is me, the world is after me. It's also really about the humility of it's just not about me. 99% of the time, it isn't.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, any closing thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, approach the world, manipulate it as you see fit because you can do magic. Just don't get bogged down in it.
Such a beaky answer.
Yeah. I think it's just an extension of like the appreciate the beauty and whimsy of the world for what it is. Um,
Mm,
there's a time and place to put it under the microscope, tear it apart, dissect everything, and learn how it works and what makes it tick. But when you're having a beautiful experience with your spirits, just ride it out. You can always pull out the
hmm.
cards later.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Salt?
Yeah, I think in general, like you guys have kind of covered everything that came to mind for me. Like I think just focusing on the spirits that you're engaging with and taking a spirit first approach, as always, is really the right answer when you're thinking about how to formulate these questions, how to address everything coming up. Like that's kind of the only standout, like major priority above all else that comes to my mind first.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. We hope this was really helpful. We please keep the discussion going. Like comment on the Instagram post, on Twitter, anywhere you find us. If you're in the Discord server for patrons, we're excited to talk about this with you. What are your experiences? How have you honed your craft? What examples of things that just didn't work with divination versus things that remedied it? We love to
Mhm.
tinker about these things because we want to kind of open source some advice in the sense of like, lineage secrets and secrets of our mentors and things we got to guard for our training is so much. Like this is so heavily present for all three of us. But what we can share, like in raw technique wise, we hope to really be able to benefit people with. And because we benefit so much from you, we benefit from our discussions, we benefit from just people that we don't even know sharing really interesting things on the internet and all the people who have slaved away writing amazing magical texts, including the grimoires themselves, that have helped us so much with reconsidering our crafts. So thank you all so much. Excited to chat about this, and we wish you all happy divining. Remember, it's take it easy,
Mhm.
breathe, purify, do your thing, and ultimately, spirit relationships first, right? Something is
Mhm.
answering the oracle. Do you know what that is? And are you able to tap into it?
Very well said, King.
Thank you, thank you. And if you need some background music for while you're divining, love a smooth transition. The Akasha records for this episode, mine is Weird by Glass Animals. I love Glass Animals. I put it on
Mhm.
constantly in the background. I'm doing chores and when I'm not listening to other podcasts. And this one's just a really fun one that gets me a bit in a divining mood.
Mhm. And mine is to really take care of those situations when you start divining and your spirits have cloudy glasses and the stubs of candles on their shrines, which is Me Gustas Tu by Manu Chao.
Yes, when you're going around in your spirits and you're like, I like you, I like these
Yeah.
things. We're friends, right?
Yeah, it's like, hey, what do you guys want as offerings? And they're like, me gusta marijuana. And I'm like, oh, me gustas too.
Yeah. Oh,
uh,
I love that. I was just
but
listening to that song today, actually. And also King of Bongo.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Hey.
yeah, yeah.
We do a
Oh man.
playlist. It's the Akasha Records of the Frightful Howls playlist on Spotify. Look it up for all your Akasha Records needs for all the different songs we featured on the podcast.
Mhm.
And if you're lucky, Salt will give you one too.
We'll see.
Be
We'll see.
Well, last time you did with the Coptic one, and it was great. A little Witcher
yeah.
action.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Awesome. And the license to depart for this episode is none other than PGM 7, 795 to 845. This is Pythagoras' request for a dream oracle. Good little divinatory omen to end us off with. And Key, I leave it to you.
I call upon you, holy angel Zaubio, from the company of the Pleiades, to whom you are subordinate and serve for all things. For whatever she might command you, you great, indestructible, fire-breathing one, who cast the rope of heaven, through which rope all things turn upon earth. Also, you do I call upon, as many of you angels who are placed under his power. Hence I call upon you, that all you may come quickly in this night, and reveal to me clearly and firmly concerning those matters I desire. I conjure you, O Lord, who rise above the earth of the whole cosmic region, by the one ruling the whole inhabited world and the benefactor of all. Hence I call upon you this night, and may you reveal all things to me through dreams with accuracy, O angel Zazobio. But just kind of like not it's the fucking Deluso Guitarian interpretation of the phenomenon. Um
Mhm. The phenomenon.
the phenomenon. God.